From 1978 to 1980, John Sewell served one tumultuous term as the mayor of Ontario's capital city. His new book, How We Changed Toronto, reflects on those days, and he joins us now for more on that time and a few reflections on Toronto's current mayor. Welcome back to TVO.
Thanks.
Great to see you here. Let us go back to 1978, the year, incidentally, I moved to this city from Hamilton. So your election was my first election. I remember this time well. You're a city councillor, and you decide to run for mayor. How come?
Well, David Crombie had decided he was going to run federally. So
he was the mayor.
He was the mayor. He'd been the mayor since '72. He'd been the progressive mayor. We'd had a very progressive council, very, very successful. And so the question is, who's going to succeed him? Well, I looked around at the other councillors, and Tony O'Donoghue and David Smith, they look both like they're going to run, and I thought, they don't express the kinds of values that I have or that David Crombie had. So I thought, who's going to do it? Well, maybe I could. And I think a second thing was that I thought, what else am I going to do? I've been on council now for 9 years. Maybe I'm tired, and I don't like people who stick around forever in public office.
So it was up or out?
Yeah, I think so.
That kind of thing.
So I thought, okay, I'll run. Now, we knew that there were some problems with that, because I think I was seen as a polarizing figure to some extent. I was very clear-spoken. I took people on when maybe I shouldn't have, but nevertheless, I did that kind of a thing. And I realized that some people were never going to vote for me no matter what I did. They didn't like what I stood for. They didn't like the style. So, I mean, there was that problem about running, but I thought, well, I'll do it.
You got lucky insofar as both those guys you just mentioned, both did run.
That's
and both
correct.
split the anti-Sewell vote.
That's correct.
So you sort of came up the middle? Is that how you look at it?
Well, came up the middle. I came over top of them. I mean, I certainly, what did I have? I think 63,000 votes or something like that, which was 13,000 more than Tony O'Donoghue behind me. So, you know, it was a clear victory. It wasn't close or anything like that. But there's no question they split it. And if they'd been together, who knows what would have happened? Don't know.
So how would we describe the Sewell mayoralty in distinction from the Crombie years that came before it? How do you think you were different from the way he was the mayor?
Well, I took on some issues that were different. You know, we had a lot of neighborhood issues during the '70s about how do you build good housing and how do you involve people in planning processes and how do we fix the library system and all that sort of thing. But I think by the time that I got mayor, we'd sort of handled all that. That was all in line. And so I was dealing with different issues that dealt with how people related to each other and, you know, what do you do about people who are culturally different in various kinds of ways, and what do we do about big social institutions like the police? And so they're the issues that I began to deal with.
I want to follow up on both those things, because I'm not sure when you came to office you saw yourself, or in fact intended to be, sort of the champion of Toronto's emerging gay community, but that happened.
And you're right. I did not see that. It was not an issue I'd been heavily involved in, but nevertheless, I got involved in. I mean, in 1973 or '74, City Council had actually passed a policy saying that we shouldn't discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation about our employees. Well, that was a policy that really was new and radical compared to most other employees. So we'd done that, and of course I'd voted for that. But it was not, the whole gay issue was not something I was involved with until
the body politic came along.
There I am. I get elected mayor, and they say, will you go to a speech? What's it about? Well, we have this gay newspaper called The Body Politic, and it's been charged by the police with printing material that they think is offensive and against the criminal code. But they say what's really happened is that the police have seized all the records of this newspaper, and so they have all the subscribers and the people who place classified ads and stuff. Well, at that point, if you were gay, you'd get fired. You had no protections at all. So the gay community saw this as a big, big threat, what the police had done. And so they asked me to speak out, and they had a rally in early January, and I went to the rally, and I said, I think we should end discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation, and we should have an amendment to the Human Rights Code, the Ontario Human Rights Code. So, boom, big speech. I think I was probably the first significant politician in Canada to actually say that, and whoop, boom.
I think probably George Moscone in San Francisco was the first champion of gay rights, and you would have been number 2 in all of North America. I mean, that's my recollection of it anyway.
Might have been true, might have been true.
There was a moment, I'm not sure if it was at that speech or at another event, where the first openly gay member of Toronto City Council, George Hislop, I think just trying to be cute, came up and gave you a kiss on the cheek while you were being interviewed on TV. I see the way you're reacting to it right now.
Yes, exactly. But I mean, let me paint the picture.
Okay.
So I make this speech in saying no discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation. A lot of media covered, big stuff, and there's death threats and so forth. But then finally it all dies down after 3 or 4 weeks or maybe a month. And then during the summer of 1979, both the Anglican Church and the United Church passed policy saying we shouldn't discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation. So the issue is sort of over. But then what happens is the election comes along for me, my re-election, a year and a half later, in the fall of 1980. And for various reasons, I get invited to open the office of George Hislop, which I didn't really think I should be doing, but my campaign had committed to it, so I go and I do it. And during an interview, it was Colin Vaughan actually on City TV. I mean, he'd been my colleague on City Council.
For this generation, we have to say, this is MP Adam Vaughan's father.
That's correct. Okay. Yes, right. He's doing an interview with me, and I'm sitting there, and George Hislop comes up behind me and kisses me on the cheek. It was astounding. And unfortunately, that became the big issue of the campaign. So, Sewell, where do you stand on it? And, you know, people kept saying, so, are you gay? Is that what you're saying? And I'd say, look, that's not the issue. The issue is not my sexual orientation. The thing is, we shouldn't be discriminating on the basis of that. I mean, as everybody knows, I mean, I had a wife and a kid, and, I mean, you know, all the rest of it.
You weren't gay, but you didn't want to, you didn't feel you needed to say to people, I have to clarify that.
That's not the issue, I kept saying. The issue is a principle, we shouldn't be discriminating. So that was a very big issue in the election campaign, and people didn't know how to deal with it. And I think a lot of people thought that I'd been much too forward on that issue.
Can I suggest another issue that people thought you maybe were a bit too forward on? Your relationships with the police were always very tense.
Yeah, that's
What do you
true.
think was what was the genesis of why you and the police at the time didn't get on very well?
Well, I'd been a critic, that's why. I mean, you know, in the 70s, cops were tops. You didn't go around criticizing them. And I remember my friend Patrick Shepard and I, and his picture's on the cover of the book with me, you know, we would go to Metro Council and say, we'd like to see a copy of the police budget. Oh, no, they said, you can't see that. Oh, excuse me? You can't see it, they say. And there was a lot of...
Your job was to approve it, right? Not go line by line.
Not to look at it.
You just had to approve it, if I recall.
That's right, and we were saying we wanted to see what it said. And there had been a whole bunch of reports by very significant people, judges, and Arthur Maloney, a big criminal lawyer, and Walter Pittman, who were saying the police have to change. We have to change the way we're training them. We have to change who's allowed to be a police officer, no height and weight requirements. We have to have an independent complaints mechanism. And the police authorities just said, no.
Why do you think they were so resistant to reforming?
Because they thought they could get away with it. And I think the police, I mean, there's a very strong police culture and always has been. I think they said, sorry, we don't want to change. We're in charge. We're protecting the public from crime, and therefore leave us alone. Whereas people like me would say, no, hold on a second, there's a two-way street here. And then what happened was in the summer of '79, police shot and killed a black man, Albert Johnson, in his house. He was mentally ill, people knew him, everybody in the neighborhood knew him, he wasn't dangerous, but they killed him. And I made a speech about that and saying, that's wrong. The police shouldn't do that. We've got to start changing a lot of policy. And I asked the police board to change the policy. Well, some people were furious at me about that, and Paul Godfrey, who was the Metro chairman, appointed Cardinal Carter to head up a royal commission or a little committee to figure out about police-community relations. But I was vilified as being a cop hater for saying these things that, in fact, a lot of other people had said before me, but I was mayor and not supposed to say them, I guess.
You were a bit, if I can put it this way, you were a bit of an easy target for them insofar as a lot of what you did 35 years ago is very conventional wisdom today. But I mean, you were the mayor who rode to work on his bike, right? Yeah. And now politicians do that today, but they didn't do it 35 years ago,
true.
right?
That's true.
And you know, for the longest time, I guess while you were city councilor, you know, you dressed kind of scruffy and wore your hair kind of scruffy, and now you put a suit on when you became mayor.
You know, that protected me. I mean, I wore jeans and a leather jacket, and I could say to people, I'm different than those other councillors. So it was a protection for me. But there's no question, when I ran for mayor, the first thing I did is I put on a suit and a tie.
Yes, you did.
You know, and there I am as mayor, always wearing a suit and tie, going to Harry Rosen's because I knew that they would dress me and I wouldn't have to worry about it, and no one would ever talk about my clothes. And they didn't. They talked about what I was saying about the police.
Your style of leadership, John Sewell, I don't have to tell you, got you in trouble a few times when you were mayor of the city, and you acknowledge that. But here's what you say: doing nothing avoids criticism, but that was never my style. My public role was tackling problems and public issues and engaging others in a search for solutions. Life is too short to be quiet in the face of injustice or even inefficiencies. I don't regret this kind of stance for a moment. Okay, you don't regret it. But you know darn well that if you just put a little water in your wine, you'd have had more than one term probably, right?
That might be true, yeah. There's a cost to doing it. Maybe I didn't do it quite right. Maybe if I'd had really good media advisors. I mean, one of the things, and I talk about it in the book, is the question of whether I should have a media person on my staff.
I don't think you had one. No, you didn't have one.
I didn't have one. I mean, everybody has them now. That might have helped. I might have been able to find a way to say things in a way that wasn't quite so inflammatory. But on the other hand, these were big subjects. I mean, that whole sexuality question, the question of saying police have to change. I mean, you know, what's really interesting to me is police haven't changed all that much since I was mayor. We've still got the issue of police going around and shooting people and not treating black people correctly, and on and on and on. So, you know, these are big and difficult issues. So I'm not unhappy that I grappled with them. Sure, I wish that I could have grappled with them in a way that was a bit more relaxed, and maybe I made some mistakes on that. You know, the thing about politics is that there you are. You have to figure out how you're going to react to things. You don't have a lot of time. You've got a character of a kind of a person you are. Well, you have to do what you can do, and that's all you can do.
You did run for re-election in 1980. You lost to Arthur Eggleton, who went on to become a member of Parliament, cabinet minister. He's now a senator today. Your colleague on City Council, Carl Jaffrey, said this of you: you deserved to lose. You antagonized every distinctive group anyone could think of, and you seemed to do it week by week. You may have been a prophet who 20 years later was right about your prophecies, but at that time, it was not the right time to say those things. Carl told you that.
Yeah.
How did you react to it when he said it?
Well, people have said that to me in the past.
Are they right?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I'm back to that thing, could I have said things in better ways? I don't think I antagonized everyone, but I think I rubbed people raw in respect to both the gay issue and the police issue. You must remember that when I lost the election in 1980, I just barely lost it. Eggleton got 88,000 votes. I got 86,000 votes. I lost by a vote a poll. My vote had gone up since 1978, so it's not as though people had abandoned me. In fact, we'd had more people come on side. And everybody had lined up on me. I mean, they had all these big people behind Eggleton really pushing, you know, Paul Godfrey and John Turner and David Smith.
Liberal and conservative coalition.
Conservatives saying, we're going to get rid of Sewell. Well, they did, but it was very tight. And there's no question, if I'd played those two issues a bit differently, maybe it would have been a different outcome. I don't know. I must say, I don't go around regretting the fact that I wasn't mayor for 10 years.
Well, you've still obviously had an influence in the intervening 35 years, but the notion of putting a little water in your wine and beveling your edges a bit, maybe you might have been able to achieve more.
You might.
Do you ever think about that?
Oh, yeah, every once in a while, sure. Yeah. But I don't try and relive the past, I'm afraid. I mean, I try and say, okay, what can I do right now?
Well, speaking of right now, I want to find out how you think the current mayor of Toronto is doing right now. How's John Tory doing?
I don't think he's doing particularly well. I think his big problem is he needs money. He doesn't have money to do anything, even to deliver basic city services like recreation or good parks or, you know, that kind, or potholes.
What do you mean they don't have money? They got $11 billion of revenue every year. How do they not have money?
He doesn't got the money to actually fix the housing that the city owns. I mean, you know, there's 400 vacant units that the city can't afford to fix. You need more money than property revenue. And what John Tory's strategy has been to say, I'll go to the federal and provincial governments and beg, and I'll be a really good beggar, and maybe they'll give me more money. I think what he's got to do is say, hey, we need more money. Maybe we've got to be like many American cities and ask for the ability to raise money from sales tax.
Well, he hasn't gone the sales tax route, but he has come out for this dedicated building and transit fund, which he is going to raise extra property tax revenue
but
for.
that's by increasing property tax, and that's going to raise about $20 million a year or something like that.
I think up to 70 at some point.
Well, yes,
by the time it's all phased in.
a number of years on.
Yeah.
But if you got 1% of the HST in Toronto, you'd be raising about $4 billion a year. Well, that's the amount of money that you need to start being serious about transit and serious about housing and serious about good city programs.
He can't do that, though, himself. He needs permission from senior
I believe that if he went and
that.
asked Kathleen Wynne, the Premier, could I have that legislation, she would say sure. I mean, she doesn't want to raise tax money and turn it over to him, nor does Trudeau in Ottawa. What he's got to do is get money himself that he can spend not as he wants, as City Council dictates. And I think you've got to, I mean, when they were rewriting the City of Toronto Act under David Miller about a decade ago, I remember Crombie and I and a few others went and said, we think you should get the sales tax. Well, David Miller said, no, don't want to do it. And of course, the reason is if you ask to have those taxes, you might have to use them. Mm-hmm. Well, back in my day, taxes weren't the issue. We said, if we're spending it reasonably, then we can have an increase. And everybody said, yeah, that's true. I believe that if we just got a sales tax and put on a 1% thing, raise that $3 or $4 billion, that would solve an awful lot of problems. So I think that's one of the big problems that John Tory has. He's got to deal with that money problem. It's not going to be solved by those two levels of government. They don't want to raise taxes in order to turn it over to John Tory.
There are some people who observe that the mayor, as one vote out of 45 on a very large city council, actually can't do that much. At the end of the day, he's one vote. Do you believe we need a strong mayor system whereby perhaps the mayor sets policy and it takes maybe, a 2/3 vote of council to overturn his policy or something like that?
No, I don't. I believe a strong mayor is somebody who is strong in the position. I believe city council is much too large. I mean, we have 2 municipal councils in Canada that are larger than about 20 or 22 people. Montreal and Toronto, both are dysfunctional. We got to restructure Toronto, so in fact you've got smaller, I'd say a number of different councils that are smaller. Because at the end of the day, you want to have people sitting around the table and talking to each other. If you have more than 20 people around the table, it doesn't work.
Can't do it.
And so it doesn't work there. And giving one person a lot of power, I mean, the mayor now has a lot of power. He can appoint the executive committee, and he does. Mm-hmm. Well, he excludes a whole bunch of people. That's not appropriate. So I would take the position that I don't want to give the mayor any extra power. The mayor can be a spokesperson. I mean, surely that's one of the points of my book. I was a spokesperson. I only had one vote, but as the mayor, I can do things, help to create some public agendas.
Represent.
And you're right, if I'd done it a better way, et cetera, et cetera. But so
let's give you the job today. You're the mayor of Toronto today. What's your top priority in the city?
My top priority is to go to Kathleen Wynne and say, we want the ability to raise the sales tax by ourselves. And I believe if we got that legislation, and I think she'd give it to us, we'd find that Peel and Regent and York and everybody says, we want it too. So, because we all desperately need money, and those governments don't have, I mean, the federal government's got a deficit, the provincial government's got a deficit. We're going to have to solve it. So if I was mayor, that's the first thing I do. And the second thing I do is I would say, let's talk about restructuring. Let's get a city council or a number of city councils we can all be happy with.
And the top priority of, if you've got this new $4 billion, let's say, of spending coming in, what's the first thing you'd spend it on? Oh,
I'd start to do restore city programs. I mean, our planning system is crazy. It's not planning at all. It's all development approval. Our building department stuff, I mean, we want to do a little addition to the house. It's now been 8 months since we put in the application trying to get it approved. This is stupid. We need better recreation. So basic services, and then I'd say, fine, let's fix that housing. Let's put some money into transit. Let's start building some new housing. And I think you could do that.
Sounds like an agenda for 2018. You interested in the job again?
Steve, too old for that.
How old are you now?
Well, I just had my 75th birthday.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
75 years old, got the Order of Canada. Can I say this out loud? Beat cancer as well.
Yeah.
You're on a roll, John Sewell. Good for you.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for coming in today. How We Changed Toronto. The inside story of 12 creative, tumultuous years in civic life, 1969 to 1980. John Sewell's been our guest.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit supporttvo.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.